You may not accept this reality check. You're broke because you don't speak the language of money. And I don't mean you can't balance a checkbook or read a financial statement. I mean you literally communicate with money the wrong way every single day. You think about it wrong. You talk about it wrong. You make decisions around it wrong. And money, like any relationship, responds to how you treat it. If you're tired of watching your bank account stay flat while everyone else seems to be moving forward, this isn't about learning more tricks. This isn't about another budget template or investment hack. This is about fundamentally changing how you relate to money through the words you use, the thoughts you allow, and the communication patterns you've been running on autopilot your entire life. Most people talk about money like it's a problem. They say, "I can't afford it." They say, "Money is tight." They say, "I'm just not good with money." And every single time they say these things, they're reinforcing a relationship with scarcity. They're speaking a language that repels wealth instead of attracting it. You've been having a conversation with money your whole life, whether you realize it or not. And if your bank account isn't where you want it to be, you're losing that conversation. Here's what nobody told you. Money is a communication system. It's a language with rules, patterns, and responses. And just like learning any language, you can't master it by accident. You can't stumble into fluency. You have to study it. You have to practice it. You have to make speaking it correctly a daily discipline until it becomes natural. The wealthy don't have some secret money gene. They don't have magic powers. What they have is a completely different way of communicating with money, about money, and through money. They think in terms of cash flow, not paychecks. They speak in terms of assets, not possessions. They make decisions based on long-term value, not short-term emotion. That's the language of money. And if you don't speak it, you'll never attract it in any meaningful way. This audiobook is not going to coddle you. I'm not here to make you feel better about your financial situation. I'm here to show you exactly where your communication with money is breaking down and how to fix it. By the time you finish this, you will understand why your current money conversations are keeping you stuck. You'll know the exact language patterns that build wealth, and you'll have the tools to start speaking money fluently starting today. You don't need more income to change your financial life. You need better communication. You need to stop lying to yourself. You need to stop using weak language around money. And you need to start having the kind of honest, disciplined conversation with your finances that actually creates results. Let me be clear about what this is. This is a complete reprogramming of how you think about, talk about, and interact with money. It's uncomfortable. It's going to challenge beliefs you've held your entire life. And it's going to require you to take responsibility for every financial decision you've made up until now. No more blaming the economy. No more blaming your job. No more blaming your parents or your circumstances. The conversation you're having with money is yours to control. So if you're ready to stop communicating like someone who struggles with money and start speaking the language that attracts it, let's begin. Not next week. Not after you feel more prepared. Right now. Chapter 1. Your money language is keeping you broke. You need to understand something fundamental. The way you talk about money is creating your financial reality. Not sort of. Not partially. Directly and completely. Every word you use, every thought you allow, every conversation you have about finances is either moving you toward wealth or pushing it further away. And right now, based on where you are financially, you're speaking the wrong language. Listen to how you talk about money for one full day. Actually pay attention. Notice what comes out of your mouth when bills arrive. Notice what you say when you see something you want, but think you can't have. Notice the words you use when someone asks about your financial situation. I guarantee you're using language that reinforces scarcity, language that confirms lack, language that tells money you're not ready for it. I can't afford that. That's scarcity language. Every time you say it, you're programming your brain to look for reasons why you can't have things instead of strategies for how you could. Wealthy people don't say, "I can't afford it." They say, "How can I afford it?" Or, "Is this worth prioritizing?" See the difference? One is a dead end. The other is a question that opens possibilities. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is tight. We're living paycheck to paycheck. These are all statements that lock you into a financial identity. They're not observations, they're declarations. and your subconscious mind treats declarations as instructions. When you repeatedly tell yourself and others that money is scarce, your brain starts filtering reality to match that statement. It stops seeing opportunities. It stops taking risks. It starts playing defense instead of offense. The language of money is not about positive thinking. This isn't some law of attraction nonsense where you just visualize wealth and it appears. This is about the literal cognitive and behavioral patterns that language creates. When you speak in terms of limitation, you think in terms of limitation. When you think in terms of limitation, you make limited decisions. And limited decisions create limited results. Wealthy people communicate about money differently because they see money differently. They don't see it as something scarce that they have to protect. They see it as a tool that multiplies when used correctly. They don't hoard it. They deploy it. They don't talk about spending money. They talk about investing it or allocating it. The words matter because the words shape the framework. Here's what's happening in your current money communication. You're constantly reinforcing a victim relationship with finances. You talk about money like it's something that happens to you instead of something you control. The bills are killing me. I never have enough. Everything's so expensive. That's victim language. And victims don't build wealth. They survive, they react, they stay stuck. You want to know why some people seem to attract money effortlessly? It's because their internal and external communication is aligned with abundance, not fake abundance, real abundance based on value, leverage, and disciplined action. They don't waste energy complaining about what they don't have. They focus entirely on what they can create, what they can build, what they can improve. Stop using weak language around money. Stop saying things like, "I'm bad with money," or "I'm not a numbers person." Those are identity statements. And once you claim an identity, your brain works overtime to make sure you live up to it. If you tell yourself you're bad with money, you'll sabotage every opportunity to prove otherwise. You'll avoid learning, you'll avoid responsibility, you'll stay comfortable in your incompetence. The first step in learning the language of money is cleaning up your vocabulary. Eliminate every phrase that reinforces lack. Eliminate every excuse disguised as fact. Eliminate every conversation where you position yourself as powerless. You are not powerless. You just don't know how to communicate with money yet. But that changes today. Start speaking in terms of possibility instead of limitation. Instead of, "I can't afford it," say, "That's not a priority right now," or "I'm choosing to allocate my resources elsewhere." See how that shifts the power dynamic? You're no longer a victim of circumstances. You're someone making choices. And people who make choices have control. Replace, "I don't have enough money" with, "I'm building my financial capacity." Replace, "Money is tight" with, "I'm being strategic with my resources." These aren't just word games. These are complete reframes of your relationship with money. When you change the language, you change the lens. When you change the lens, you change what you see. And when you change what you see, you change what you do. Your money language also affects how other people relate to you financially. If you constantly talk about being broke, people won't offer you opportunities. They won't bring you deals. They won't think of you when something lucrative comes up. Because you've communicated that you're not a player. You've positioned yourself outside the game. Wealthy people recognize other wealthy people not by their bank accounts, but by how they talk, by how they think, by how they approach problems and opportunities. Here's something most people never realize. Money is listening. Not literally, obviously, but the universe, opportunities, other people with resources, they're all responding to the frequency you're broadcasting. And if your frequency is scarcity, complaint, and limitation, that's what you'll attract more of. If your frequency is abundance, strategy, and action, opportunities start appearing that you never saw before. This isn't mystical. It's practical. When you speak and think like someone who understands money, you start noticing things. You start seeing deals. You start recognizing patterns. You start connecting dots. Because your brain's reticular activating system, the filter that determines what you pay attention to, is now tuned to wealth-building information instead of scarcity-confirming information. The language of money is not complicated, but it is precise, and it requires discipline. You can't speak abundance on Monday and scarcity on Tuesday. You can't talk like you're building wealth in public and then go home and complain about being broke in private. The communication has to be consistent. It has to be real. And it has to be backed up by action. Every time you open your mouth about money, you're either building your wealth or destroying it. Every time you think about money, you're either expanding your capacity or contracting it. This is not dramatic. This is how the brain works. This is how behavior is shaped. This is how financial realities are constructed, one thought and one word at a time. So right now, make a decision. Decide that you will no longer speak the language of scarcity. Decide that you will no longer use words that reinforce lack. Decide that from this moment forward, your communication about money will reflect the financial life you're building, not the one you're leaving behind. That decision, that shift in language, is where everything changes. Not eventually. Immediately. Chapter 2. Money responds to clarity, not hope. You want to know why your finances are a mess? Because your communication about them is vague. You hope things will get better. You wish you had more. You dream about being wealthy someday. But hope is not a language money understands. Wishes are not strategies. Dreams without plans are just fantasies. Money responds to one thing: clarity. Absolute, unshakable, specific clarity. Most people have no idea what they actually want financially. Ask them, how much do you need to feel secure? And they'll say, more. Ask them, what does financial freedom look like? And they'll say, not having to worry about money. That's not clarity. That's fog. And you cannot communicate effectively through fog. The language of money requires precision. You need to know exactly what you're asking for, exactly when you need it, and exactly what you're willing to do to get it. Vague goals create vague results. Specific targets create focused action. If your financial communication is filled with someday, hopefully, and I wish, you're not speaking money's language. You're speaking the language of dreamers. And dreamers stay broke. Here's what clarity sounds like. I will have $10,000 in my emergency fund within 12 months. Not, I hope to save some money. I will generate $5,000 per month in passive income by the end of next year. Not, I'd like to make more money somehow. I will pay off $15,000 of debt in the next 18 months by allocating an extra $803 per month. Not, I need to get out of debt eventually. See the difference? Clarity includes numbers, timelines, and actions. It removes all ambiguity. It creates a target your brain can actually lock on to. When you communicate with money through clear, specific goals, your subconscious goes to work finding paths to make it happen. When you communicate through vague hopes, your subconscious has nothing to work with. Most people avoid getting specific because specificity creates accountability. If you say, I want to be rich someday, you can't fail. It's always someday. But if you say, I will have a net worth of $500,000 in 5 years, now there's a standard. Now there's a measurement. Now you can't hide behind vague intentions. That discomfort is exactly why most people stay vague. And it's exactly why they stay broke. Money also responds to clarity about what you're willing to trade. You can't just demand wealth and expect it to appear. You have to communicate what you're bringing to the table. What value are you creating? What problem are you solving? What skill are you developing? Wealthy people are very clear about their value proposition. They know exactly what they offer, and they know exactly what it's worth. If you want more money, you need to get clear about what you're giving in exchange. Are you willing to work extra hours? Are you willing to learn a new skill? Are you willing to start a side business? Are you willing to cut expenses and redirect that money into investments? Money doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about your actions, and your actions are a form of communication. Here's where most people's money communication breaks down. They want something different, but they're not willing to do anything different. They want wealth, but they won't change their habits. They want financial freedom, but they won't make sacrifices. That's not a conversation. That's a wish list, and wish lists don't build bank accounts. Clarity also means being honest about your current situation. You can't fix what you won't acknowledge. If you're in debt, say it out loud. Write down the exact number. Look at it. That's not negative thinking. That's clarity. That's the first step of communication. You're telling yourself and money exactly where you stand. Not where you wish you stood, where you actually are. Most people lie to themselves about money. They round down their debt, they round up their income, they ignore certain expenses, they pretend things aren't as bad as they are. That's not clarity, that's avoidance. And avoidance guarantees you'll stay stuck. You cannot communicate effectively with money if you're lying about the numbers. Get a piece of paper right now. Write down your exact income. Write down your exact expenses. Write down your exact debts. Write down your exact net worth, even if it's negative. This is not to make you feel bad. This is to give you a clear starting point. You need to know where you are before you can communicate where you're going. Once you have clarity on your current situation and clarity on your target, you need clarity on your path. What are the specific steps between here and there? Not vague steps like save more or make better decisions. Specific steps. Open a high-yield savings account, automate a transfer of $200 every payday, cut your streaming subscriptions, and redirect that $50 per month. Apply for 3 higher-paying positions this month. Clarity in action. The reason wealthy people seem to move so much faster than everyone else is because their communication with money is crystalline. They don't wonder what to do next. They know. They don't hope things work out. They plan for outcomes. They don't wish for opportunities. They create them through clear, directed action. You need to stop using words like maybe, hopefully, someday, and I'll try. Those are not the language of money. Those are the language of people who stay stuck. Replace them with I will, by this date, through this action. That linguistic shift forces you into a completely different mental space, a space where you're in control, a space where results are expected, not hoped for. Clarity also requires you to communicate priorities. You cannot build wealth if everything is equally important. You cannot attract money if you're scattering your energy in every direction. What matters most financially? Pay off debt first or build savings? Increase income or decrease expenses? Invest for growth or preserve capital? You have to choose, and your choice needs to be clear and communicated through your actions. Here's the test. Can you explain your financial plan to someone in under 2 minutes with specific numbers and dates? If you can't, you don't have clarity. You have a vague idea. And vague ideas don't produce results. Clarity is the difference between, I want to retire comfortably, and I will have $1.2 million invested by age 60 to generate $4,000 per month in passive income. Money doesn't respond to emotion. It doesn't care if you're stressed. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you had a hard childhood. Money responds to clarity and action. That's it. If you want different results, you need clearer communication. And clearer communication starts with getting brutally specific about what you want, what you're willing to do, and what you refuse to accept. Stop hoping your finances will improve. Start communicating a clear plan. Stop wishing you had more money. Start defining exactly how much and by when. Stop dreaming about financial freedom. Start outlining the exact path that gets you there. That's the language money speaks. That's the language that creates wealth. And that's the language you need to master if you're serious about changing your financial life. Chapter 3. Stop negotiating with yourself about money. You lose financially not because you don't know what to do. You lose because you keep talking yourself out of doing it. Every single day, you have conversations with yourself about money. And most of those conversations end with you compromising, delaying, or making excuses. That internal dialogue is destroying your financial future faster than any external obstacle ever could. Here's what that sounds like. I should transfer money to savings today, but I'll do it next week. I know I need to cancel that subscription, but it's only $15. I should look for a better job, but this one is comfortable. I know I'm overspending, but I deserve to treat myself. These internal negotiations happen hundreds of times, and every time you talk yourself out of a good financial decision, you reinforce a pattern of self-sabotage. The language of money requires non-negotiable standards. Wealthy people don't debate with themselves about basic financial discipline. They don't negotiate, they execute. When they set a rule, they follow it. When they make a plan, they stick to it. There's no internal committee meeting every time a decision needs to be made. The decision was already made. The only thing left is action. You need to eliminate the negotiation loop, that voice in your head that says, just this once, or it's not that big of a deal, or I'll make up for it later. That voice is not your friend. That voice is the reason you're not where you want to be financially, because just this once happens every week. It's not that big of a deal, adds up to thousands of dollars wasted, and I'll make up for it later never happens. Here's how to stop negotiating. Set clear financial rules and make them non-negotiable. Not guidelines, not suggestions, rules. I transfer 20% of every paycheck to investments before I spend anything else. I do not carry credit card debt ever. I review my spending every Sunday. I do not make emotional purchases. Once these are rules, there's nothing to negotiate. You either follow them or you're breaking your own standard. Most people think this sounds rigid. They think it removes freedom, but it's the exact opposite. Negotiating with yourself every single day is exhausting. It drains willpower. It creates decision fatigue. It opens the door to bad choices. When you have clear, non-negotiable rules, you free up mental energy. You don't have to debate. You just act. That's freedom. The internal negotiation also happens with bigger decisions. I should start investing, but the market seems risky right now. I should start a side business, but I don't have time. I should move to a cheaper place, but I like this neighborhood. Notice the pattern? There's always a but. There's always a reason to delay. There's always an excuse dressed up as logic. That's your scared mind trying to keep you comfortable. It's trying to protect you from risk, from change, from effort, and in doing so, it's keeping you broke. Because building wealth requires you to move through discomfort. It requires you to take calculated risks. It requires you to do things that feel hard. If you keep negotiating your way out of those things, you'll never grow. Here's the hard truth. Every time you negotiate with yourself about money, you're training your brain to be weak. You're teaching yourself that your word doesn't matter. You're reinforcing that your standards are flexible. And if your standards are flexible, your results will be inconsistent. You cannot build lasting wealth on inconsistent action. Wealthy people have a completely different internal dialogue. When they set a financial goal, the conversation is over. There's no daily relitigation of whether it's still a good idea. There's no constant questioning of whether they really need to save that much. The decision was made with clarity, and now the only question is execution. That's the language of discipline. That's the language of money. You need to catch yourself in the act of negotiating. The moment you hear yourself saying but, or maybe just this time, or I'll start tomorrow, stop. Recognize that you're about to sabotage yourself, and instead of following that impulse, do the thing you know you should do. Transfer the money, cancel the subscription, make the call, take the action, break the pattern. This is not about perfection. You will slip. You will make mistakes. But the goal is to stop making the same mistake repeatedly because you keep negotiating yourself into it. The goal is to build a financial communication system with yourself that's based on commitment, not convenience. Based on long-term results, not short-term feelings. One of the most damaging negotiations people make is around income. I should ask for a raise, but they might say no. I should apply for that better job, but I might not get it. I should raise my prices, but I might lose clients. So they don't ask. They don't apply. They don't raise prices. And they stay stuck at the same income level, negotiating themselves into mediocrity. Stop negotiating with fear. Fear is not a good financial advisor. Fear wants you to stay small, stay safe, stay comfortable. But wealth is built outside of comfort. It's built by people who stop negotiating with their scared mind and start taking the actions that move them forward. You ask for the raise even though it's uncomfortable. You apply for the better job even though rejection is possible. You raise your prices even though some clients might leave. The internal negotiation also shows up in spending. I know I shouldn't buy this, but it's on sale. I know I should save this money, but I've been working hard. I know this isn't in the budget, but it'll make me happy. These are not negotiations. These are rationalizations. They're excuses disguised as reasoning, and they're keeping you broke. Here's how you know if you're negotiating. If you're trying to convince yourself that something is okay, you already know it's not. If you have to justify a purchase, you shouldn't make it. If you have to talk yourself into a financial decision, it's probably the wrong decision. The right decisions don't require negotiation. They're clear, they're aligned, they're obvious. The wealthiest people I know don't spend time debating financial basics. They don't wonder if they should save or spend. They save first. They don't question whether they should invest or keep cash. They invest systematically. They don't debate whether they should track their spending. They track it religiously. There's no negotiation because the standards are already set. You need to make your financial decisions once, with clarity, and then execute repeatedly without redeciding. That's how discipline is built. That's how wealth is built, not through constant negotiation, but through consistent execution of clear standards. Set the rule, follow the rule, repeat. That's the language of money. So stop having internal debates about basic financial responsibilities. Stop convincing yourself that bad decisions are okay just this once. Stop negotiating yourself into comfort and away from growth. Set your standards, make them non-negotiable, and execute. That shift in your internal communication will change your financial trajectory faster than any external strategy ever could. Chapter 4. Money only flows to those who respect it. You say you want more money, but you don't respect the money you already have. And until you change that, you'll never attract wealth. Because money, like any relationship, responds to how it's treated. If you're careless with it, wasteful with it, if you ignore it and take it for granted, it won't stick around. Respect is not just a nice idea. It's the foundation of wealth-building communication. Here's what disrespect looks like. Not knowing where your money goes, not tracking your spending, leaving bills unpaid until the last minute, throwing receipts away without reviewing them, letting money sit in a checking account earning nothing, not having a budget, not planning ahead. These are all signs that you don't respect money, and money knows it. Wealthy people treat every dollar like it matters, not because they're cheap, because they understand that money is a tool, and tools must be maintained. They track their spending obsessively. They know exactly where they are financially at any given moment. They review their accounts regularly. They treat their money with the same care and attention they'd treat any valuable asset. That's respect. When you respect money, you pay attention to it. You don't let it slip through your fingers without awareness. You don't make purchases on autopilot. You don't ignore your financial statements. You treat your relationship with money like something that matters because it does. And the more respect you show, the more money seems to find its way to you. This is not mystical. It's psychological and behavioral. When you respect money, you make better decisions. You think before you spend. You prioritize value over impulse. You delay gratification. You invest instead of consume. These behaviors, compounded over time, create wealth. It's not complicated, but it does require respect. Disrespect shows up in language too. It's only $10. It's just a small purchase. I'll never miss it. Every time you minimize money, you disrespect it, and your subconscious mind registers that. It starts treating money as unimportant, as disposable. And when your mind treats money as disposable, your actions follow. You waste it, you lose it, you wonder where it all went. Respect means acknowledging that every dollar has potential. That $10 you dismiss, invested over 30 years at 8% return becomes $100. That small purchase, repeated weekly, costs you $520 a year. That money you won't miss could have been working for you. Respect means seeing money not just for what it is now, but for what it could become. You also show respect by keeping your financial commitments. If you say you're going to save a certain amount, you do it. If you set a budget, you follow it. If you commit to paying off debt, you make the payments. Your word to yourself about money has to mean something. Because if it doesn't, you're communicating that financial discipline is optional. And optional discipline creates optional results. Most people break their financial commitments constantly. They set a savings goal and then rate it for non-emergencies. They create a budget and then ignore it by the second week. They promise themselves they'll stop using credit cards and then swipe again the next day. Every broken commitment erodes respect. Not just respect for money, but respect for yourself. Here's a question. If you treated your closest relationship the way you treat money, would that person still be around? Would they trust you? Would they want to stay? Probably not. Because carelessness, inconsistency, and disrespect destroy relationships. The same is true with money. You cannot build wealth through disrespect any more than you can build love through neglect. Respect also means being grateful for what you have, not in a fake gratitude manifestation way, in a real, grounded way. You have money coming in. You have the ability to earn. You have resources that billions of people don't. Acknowledging that isn't about guilt. It's about appreciation. And appreciation creates a mindset of abundance instead of scarcity. When you're grateful for your current money, even if it's not much, you treat it better. You're more careful with it. You're more strategic. You're less likely to waste it on things that don't matter. Gratitude shifts your relationship with money from resentment to partnership. And partnerships are far more productive than resentful obligations. Disrespect also shows up in how you talk about money to others, complaining constantly about not having enough, bragging about expensive purchases to impress people, lying about your financial situation to save face. All of this is disrespectful communication. It treats money as a status symbol or a source of stress instead of a tool for building freedom. The language of respect is honest and measured. You don't exaggerate your wealth. You don't downplay your struggles. You speak about money clearly, without emotion clouding the facts. You treat financial conversations seriously, not as gossip or bragging opportunities. This creates a respectful relationship not just with your money, but with the concept of money itself. Here's what respect requires in practice. You check your accounts weekly. You review every transaction. You know your net worth at all times. You have a plan for every dollar. You save before you spend. You invest systematically. You protect your money from unnecessary risk. You avoid waste. You make intentional choices. These actions communicate respect louder than any words ever could. And when you respect money, something shifts. Opportunities appear. People with resources trust you. Investments perform better. Not because of magic, but because your relationship with money has fundamentally changed. You're no longer fighting it, avoiding it, or resenting it. You're working with it. And that partnership is what creates wealth. Most people will never be wealthy because they never develop respect. They see money as something to spend, to chase, to worry about, but never something to honor. They want it to show up in their life, but they treat it like garbage when it does. That's not how wealth works. Wealth flows to those who respect it enough to steward it well. So if you want more money, start by respecting the money you have right now. Every dollar, every account, every transaction, treat it like it matters. Because it does. And when you communicate respect through your actions, money starts treating you differently, not eventually, immediately. That's the language it speaks. That's the language that attracts riches. Chapter 5. Change your financial vocabulary. Change your reality. The words you use about money are not neutral. They're programming. Every time you say, "I'm broke," you're installing poverty software into your brain. Every time you say, "I can't afford it," you're reinforcing limitation as your identity. Every time you say, "Money is tight," you're choosing scarcity as your default setting. Your vocabulary isn't describing your reality. It's creating it. This is not about positive affirmations or pretending you're rich when you're not. This is about using language that expands possibility instead of language that contracts it. It's about eliminating words and phrases that lock you into a fixed financial identity. It's about communicating in a way that programs your mind for wealth-building behavior instead of poverty-perpetuating behavior. Let's start with the most damaging phrase, "I can't afford it." You've probably said this hundreds, maybe thousands of times, and every time you do, you're training your brain to stop looking for solutions. You're declaring yourself powerless. You're ending the conversation before it begins. Wealthy people don't say, "I can't afford it." They say, "How can I afford it?" Or, "Is this worth prioritizing over other goals?" See the difference? One phrase is a dead end. The other is a question that activates problem solving. One reinforces victimhood. The other reinforces agency. Same financial situation, completely different mental framework. And that framework determines everything. It determines whether you find creative solutions or stay stuck, whether you build income or accept limitation, whether you grow or stagnate. Here's another toxic phrase, "I'm not good with money." This is an identity statement. And once you claim an identity, your subconscious will work overtime to prove you right. If you believe you're not good with money, you'll avoid learning about it. You'll avoid taking responsibility. You'll make bad decisions and use them as proof that you were right about yourself. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Replace it with, I'm learning to manage money better, or I'm developing financial discipline. Notice how that opens up growth? It positions you as someone in progress, not someone with a fixed flaw. That linguistic shift changes everything. Now mistakes are learning experiences, not confirmations of your identity. Now effort makes sense because you're building a skill, not fighting your nature. Money doesn't grow on trees. You heard this growing up, and now you repeat it without thinking. But what message does that send? That money is scarce, that it's hard to get, that there's only so much to go around. That's scarcity programming. The truth: money is abundant. It's literally being created every day. There are trillions of dollars moving through the economy. The question is not whether money exists. The question is whether you're positioned to receive it. Reframe it. Money flows to those who create value. Money is abundant for those who solve problems. There's enough money for everyone who earns it. These statements program a completely different mindset. They position you as an active participant in wealth creation, not a passive victim of scarcity. And that shift in language creates a shift in behavior. Living paycheck to paycheck, this phrase normalizes financial insecurity. It makes barely surviving sound like a reasonable way to live. But it's not. It's a crisis masquerading as a lifestyle, and the more you say it, the more you accept it. Stop using that phrase. Even if that's currently your reality, don't cement it with language. Instead, I'm building financial margin, or I'm transitioning from reactive to strategic money management. You're not denying reality. You're positioning yourself as someone actively working to change it. That's a completely different communication. That's the language of someone who's moving, not someone who's stuck. Here's another one. I deserve to treat myself. This phrase has probably cost you thousands of dollars in impulsive spending. Because anytime you feel tired, stressed, or accomplished, your brain uses this phrase to justify purchases you don't need. But here's the truth. You don't build wealth by treating yourself constantly. You build wealth by investing in yourself strategically. Replace I deserve to treat myself with I deserve to build a stable financial future. Now the reward is long-term security, not short-term dopamine. Now you're still honoring yourself, but in a way that actually serves you. This is not about denying pleasure. It's about redefining what truly treats you well. A secure financial foundation treats you better than another restaurant meal or online purchase. I'll start saving when I make more money. This is one of the biggest lies people tell themselves. Because the habit of saving isn't about the amount, it's about the discipline. If you're not saving 10% of $2,000, you won't save 10% of $5,000. The income isn't the problem, the habit is. And habits don't magically improve with more money, they get exposed. Reframe it. I'm building the habit of saving regardless of my income level. Now you're focused on the behavior, not the conditions. Now you can start today, not someday. Even saving continue $20 a week builds the habit, and once the habit is solid, scaling it up becomes easy. But if you wait for perfect conditions, you'll wait forever. Your financial vocabulary also includes how you talk about debt. Most people say, I have debt, like it's a terminal diagnosis. They accept it as part of their identity. But debt is not who you are. It's a current situation that can be changed. I'm working to eliminate debt is completely different. It's active, it's progressive, it's powerful, or how you talk about your job. I'm stuck in this job versus I'm using this job as a stepping stone while building my next move. Same situation, completely different mindset. One is victimhood, the other is strategy. And strategy attracts opportunity. Victimhood attracts more of the same. Even small word choices matter. Spending money versus investing money, or allocating resources. Spending sounds like it's gone forever. Investing or allocating sounds strategic, purposeful. Buying things versus acquiring assets. One is consumption, the other is wealth building. The words shape how you see every financial decision. Start monitoring your money language obsessively. Write down every phrase you use about finances for 1 week, then review it. How much of your vocabulary is scarcity-based? How much is victim-based? How much reinforces limitation? Then, systematically replace each toxic phrase with an empowering one. This is not wordplay. This is reprogramming. And here's what happens when you change your vocabulary. Your thoughts change. Your thoughts drive your emotions. Your emotions influence your decisions. Your decisions create your results. It all starts with language. Change the words, change the chain, change the chain, change your financial reality. The language of money is precise, intentional, and growth-oriented. It doesn't deny current reality, but it doesn't cement it either. It positions you as someone in motion, someone solving problems, someone building value. That's how wealthy people talk. Not because they have money, but because that language is what created the money in the first place. So stop using poverty language. Stop using victim language. Stop using language that makes financial struggle sound permanent. Your words are creating your future. Choose them like your wealth depends on it. Because it does. Chapter 6. Communicate value, not hours. You will never build real wealth by trading hours for dollars. That's not the language of money. That's the language of survival. Because no matter how much you charge per hour, there's a cap. You only have so many hours. And when you stop working, the money stops flowing. Wealthy people understand that money flows to value, not time. And until you learn to communicate in terms of value creation instead of time spent, you'll stay stuck in the paycheck mentality. Here's what most people do. They think about their income in terms of hours. $25 per hour. I worked 40 hours this week. If I work more hours, I'll make more money. That's employee thinking. That's trading your finite life energy for linear income. And the moment you stop trading, the income stops. That's not wealth. That's survival with breaks. Wealthy people think differently. They don't ask, how many hours will this take? They ask, how much value will this create? They don't focus on the input of time. They focus on the output of results. And they structure their income around value delivery, not time investment. That's why they can make more in one strategic decision than most people make in a month of hard labor. The language of value is completely different. Instead of, I work 40 hours a week, it's, I solve problems that save companies $100,000 annually. Instead of, I charge $50 per hour, it's, I deliver results worth $5,000. Instead of, I put in my time, it's, I create systems that scale. See the shift? You're no longer focused on your effort, you're focused on the outcome, and money follows outcomes, not effort. This doesn't mean your time doesn't matter. It means that time is the wrong measurement for wealth, because you can work 80 hours a week and still be broke if you're creating low-value outcomes. Or you can work 20 hours a week and be wealthy if you're creating high-value outcomes. The difference is what you're measuring. The difference is what you're communicating. When you communicate your worth in terms of time, you cap yourself. There's only so much you can charge per hour before the market pushes back. And there's only so many hours you can physically work. But when you communicate your worth in terms of value, there's no cap. The value you create can scale infinitely. A system you build once can generate value for years. An idea you develop can impact thousands of people. That's leverage. That's the language of money. Most employees never make this shift. They stay locked in hourly thinking because that's what they've been taught. Put in your 8 hours, do your job, get your paycheck. But that communication keeps them dependent on active income. They can never stop working because the value stops when they do. They're on a treadmill, and the only way off is to change the language. Start thinking about your work differently. What problems are you solving? What results are you creating? What value are you delivering? If you can't answer those questions clearly, you're probably just filling time. And filling time doesn't create wealth. Creating value does. Here's the shift. Instead of asking your boss for a raise based on tenure, communicate the measurable value you've created. I implemented this system that saved the company X. I increased efficiency by Y%. I brought in Z new clients. Now you're speaking value language. Now you're negotiating from outcomes, not time served. And outcomes have much higher ceilings than time. If you're an entrepreneur or freelancer, stop charging by the hour. Charge by the project, by the result, by the transformation. I will increase your revenue by 20% is worth far more than I will work 10 hours for you. One is measured by your effort, the other is measured by their gain. And people pay more for gains than they do for effort. This also changes how you look at passive income. Passive income is value that continues delivering after the time investment is done. You write a book once, it sells for years. You create a course once, it generates income repeatedly. You build a system once, it produces results continuously. That's the language of wealth. That's how you decouple income from hours. Most people avoid this because it requires a different kind of work. It requires building systems, creating intellectual property, developing skills that scale. It's harder up front, but it's exponentially more valuable over time. The question is, are you willing to do the hard work now that creates easy money later? Or will you keep choosing the easy work now that keeps you trapped forever? The language of value also means you stop accepting payment structures that limit you. If your income is purely salary, you're capped. If your income is purely hourly, you're capped. But if your income is tied to performance, equity, or scalable products, there's no cap. You communicate to money that you want to be rewarded for results, not for showing up. And money responds to that. This is not about working less. Sometimes creating value requires intense work, but it's work that compounds. It's work that builds assets. It's work that creates leverage. That's completely different from working hard in a job where every week resets to zero. One is building, the other is treading water. You also need to stop undervaluing your own contributions. Most people undersell themselves because they measure by time, not impact. I only spent 2 hours on this, so I shouldn't charge much. That's the wrong calculation. If those 2 hours solved a 50,000 problem, they're worth a percentage of that value, not a multiple of your hourly rate. Wealthy people understand this. That's why they can charge what seems like outrageous amounts for simple work, because they're charging for the value, not the time. Learn to communicate your value clearly. When someone asks what you do, don't say, "I work in marketing." Say, "I help companies grow their revenue through strategic positioning." One is a job title. The other is a value statement. One positions you as replaceable. The other positions you as essential. And essential people get paid more. The more you practice thinking and speaking in terms of value, the more opportunities open up. Because now you're looking for leverage. You're looking for ways to multiply impact. You're looking for systems, automation, delegation, and ownership. You're no longer satisfied with trading time for money because you know there's a better way. Wealth is built by creating value that scales. That's the only language money truly respects. Time runs out, value compounds, hours are finite, impact is infinite. You choose what you communicate, you choose what you optimize for, and that choice determines whether you stay stuck in the paycheck trap or break free into real wealth. So stop measuring your worth in hours, start measuring it in outcomes. Stop communicating your contribution in terms of time, start communicating it in terms of transformation. That shift in language is the shift that changes everything. Because once you learn to communicate value, money starts flowing in ways that time-based thinking could never achieve. Chapter 7. Financial silence builds wealth louder than words. You talk too much about money, and every time you do, you weaken your position. Wealthy people have a completely different relationship with financial communication. They keep their mouths shut. They don't brag about what they have. They don't complain about what they don't have. They don't announce their moves. They operate in strategic silence. And that silence is a form of power that most people never understand. Here's what happens when you talk too much about money. You invite opinions. You invite judgment. You invite envy. You create pressure to maintain appearances. You open yourself up to bad advice, requests for money, and people measuring your worth by your bank account. None of that serves you. Silence protects you from all of it. Most people can't keep their financial situation private. They complain when money is tight. They brag when they get a raise. They announce every investment. They post every purchase. They need external validation for their financial decisions. And all of that is weakness disguised as transparency. Because real power doesn't need an audience. The language of money includes knowing when not to speak. You don't tell everyone your income. You don't share your net worth. You don't explain your investment strategy. You don't justify your spending choices. You keep your financial business private, not because you're hiding, because you're protecting. Protecting your focus, your energy, and your decisions from outside interference. When you stay silent about your finances, people stop having opinions about them. They stop comparing. They stop judging. They stop asking for things. And most importantly, you stop feeling the pressure to perform financially for others. You're free to make decisions based purely on what's best for you, not on what looks good to others. That freedom is invaluable. Silence also prevents self-sabotage. Every time you announce a financial goal publicly, you get a small dopamine hit from the announcement. Your brain registers that as partial success, and that hit reduces the motivation to actually do the work. Studies show that people who talk about their goals are less likely to achieve them because they've already received social credit for the intention. Silence keeps the hunger alive. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They don't post about their investments. They don't brag about their portfolios. They don't announce when they buy property or start a business. They move in silence and let the results speak. Because results are louder than announcements, success that shows up without explanation carries far more weight than success that needs constant promotion. Here's what silence allows: clear thinking. When you're not performing for an audience, you can make decisions based purely on logic and strategy. You're not influenced by what people might think. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not managing perceptions. You're just moving toward your goals with absolute clarity. That's when the best financial decisions happen. Silence also protects you from bad advice. The moment people know you have money or are trying to build it, suddenly everyone's a financial expert. They'll tell you what you should invest in. They'll warn you about risks. They'll share their cousin's success story, and most of that advice is garbage. But if they don't know your financial situation, they can't offer opinions. Problem solved. There's also the issue of envy. Money creates strange reactions in people. Some will celebrate your success, but many won't. They'll resent it. They'll minimize it. They'll attribute it to luck or privilege instead of your hard work. And that energy is toxic. Silence protects you from absorbing that negativity. Let them wonder. Let them guess. You just keep building. The language of financial silence also means not explaining yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you spend your money. You don't need to justify why you didn't buy something expensive or why you did. You don't need to defend your frugality or your splurges. Your financial choices are yours alone. Full stop. Most people struggle with this because they are addicted to external validation. They want people to approve of their decisions. They want to be seen as successful or smart or responsible. But that need for approval creates a leash. It makes your financial behavior about other people instead of about you. And you can't build wealth for an audience. You build it for yourself. Here's what you do instead. You operate in silence. You make your moves. You build your wealth. And when people notice, when the results become undeniable, you still don't explain. You just smile and move forward. Because at that point, the success is self-evident. It doesn't need words. It doesn't need validation. It just is. Silence is also strategic. If people don't know what you're doing financially, they can't interfere. They can't discourage you. They can't talk you out of good decisions or talk you into bad ones. You're insulated. You're protected. You can take risks without public failure. You can make changes without having to explain them. That freedom accelerates wealth building faster than almost anything else. Think about the wealthiest people you know or have heard about. How much do you actually know about their day-to-day financial decisions? Probably very little, because they don't share, they don't broadcast, they don't need to. Their results do all the talking, and their silence gives them room to operate without the weight of public opinion. You need to develop that same discipline. Stop posting about your financial wins. Stop complaining about your financial struggles. Stop announcing your plans. Just work, just build, just execute, and let the compound effect of your silent, consistent action create results that speak louder than any post, any conversation, any announcement ever could. This doesn't mean you can't have trusted advisors or mentors you confide in, but those should be few and carefully chosen. People who have no stake in your decisions other than your success. People who have financial results you respect. Not random friends who will give you their uninformed opinion. Not family members who will project their own fears onto your choices. Financial silence also builds discipline. When no one knows what you're doing, there's no social pressure to maintain. You can fail privately and pivot without embarrassment. You can experiment without judgment. You can take unconventional paths without explaining yourself. That freedom is where innovation happens. That's where breakthrough strategies are developed. And here's the final piece. Silence creates mystery, and mystery creates interest. When you're not broadcasting every move, people start to wonder. They start to respect. They start to take you more seriously. Because someone who moves in silence and produces results is far more impressive than someone who talks constantly and produces little. So make a new rule. Your financial life is private, your income is private, your investments are private, your goals are private. You share only when there's strategic value in sharing, and even then, you share selectively. Everything else stays between you and your bank account. That discipline, that silence, that strategic discretion is one of the most powerful forms of financial communication, because it communicates that you're serious, that you're focused, that you're building something real. And you don't need an audience to do it. Chapter 8. Speak abundance, even when the account is low. Here's where most people completely lose the thread. They let their current circumstances dictate their language. When the bank account is low, they speak poverty. When money is tight, they speak scarcity. When things are hard, they speak limitation. And by doing that, they guarantee those circumstances continue. Because the language you use doesn't just describe your reality. It reinforces it, it extends it, it locks it in. Speaking abundance when you're broke is not about lying. It's not about fake positivity or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about refusing to let your temporary situation define your permanent language. It's about understanding that the words you use today are programming your behavior tomorrow, and your behavior determines your results. When you say, "I'm broke," what are you really communicating? You're declaring your current situation as your identity. You're telling your brain, "This is who I am." And your brain, being the efficient machine it is, will work to keep you consistent with that identity. It will filter opportunities through that lens. It will make decisions that confirm that belief. You're not describing reality, you're creating it. Abundance language, on the other hand, is expansive. Even when resources are limited, you speak in terms of growth, possibility, and strategy. Not, "I'm broke." I'm building. Not, "I can't afford it." I'm prioritizing differently right now. Not, "Money never sticks around." I'm developing better financial systems. See the difference? You're acknowledging reality without cementing it. You're positioning yourself as someone in motion, not someone stuck. This requires incredible discipline, because every external signal is telling you to speak limitation. Your bank account is low. Bills are stacking up. The pressure is real. But that's exactly when your language matters most. That's when you need to speak abundance more than ever. Because if you speak poverty when things are hard, you'll train your mind to expect poverty, and expectation becomes reality. Abundance language is strategic. It keeps your mind open to solutions. When you speak abundance, you're telling your brain, "Keep looking for opportunities." When you speak scarcity, you're telling your brain, "There's nothing we can do." One creates possibility, the other creates resignation, and resignation guarantees nothing changes. Here's how this works in practice. Someone offers you an opportunity. Your bank account says no. Your scarcity language says, "I can't afford it." But your abundance language says, "How can I make this work? Is there a payment plan? Can I create value to offset the cost? Can I bring someone else in?" You're not denying the reality of low funds. You're refusing to let that reality end the conversation, or you're looking at your debt. Scarcity language says, I'll never get out of this. Abundance language says, I'm attacking this systematically. In 18 months, this is cut in half. In 36 months, it's gone. Same situation, completely different trajectory. Because language determines focus, and focus determines outcomes. Most people think abundance language only works when you already have money, but that's backward. Abundance language is what creates the money. The wealthy spoke abundance before they were wealthy. That's how they became wealthy. They refused to speak poverty even when their circumstances screamed it. They held the language of possibility through the hardship, and that language shaped their decisions, which shaped their results. You have to be obsessive about this. You monitor every sentence, every thought, every word. When you catch yourself speaking scarcity, you stop mid-sentence and reframe, out loud if necessary. Actually, let me say that differently. This is not about being polite. This is about reprogramming. You cannot let scarcity language run unchecked in your mind. It's poison, and you're choosing to stop drinking it. Abundance language also changes how others perceive you. When you speak with possibility, even in difficult circumstances, people see strength. They see resilience. They see someone who's going to figure it out, and that attracts support, opportunities, and resources. Scarcity language does the opposite. It signals defeat. It signals you've given up, and people don't invest in defeat. This is especially critical when you're talking to yourself. Your internal dialogue is the most important conversation you'll ever have. And if that conversation is filled with, I'll never make it, and this is too hard, and I should just accept being broke, you're finished before you start. But if that conversation is, I'm finding a way, and this is temporary, and I'm building something better, you've got a chance. You've got momentum. You've got a future. Abundance language also requires you to speak in terms of growth, not arrival. You don't say, I'm rich. That's fake, and your mind won't believe it. You say, I'm building wealth. That's true regardless of your current situation. You can be broke and building. That's honest. That's powerful. That's abundance language without the delusion. You also speak abundance by talking about investments, not expenses. I'm investing in my education. I'm investing in my health. I'm investing in experiences that expand my thinking. Even when money is tight, frame your spending as investment where appropriate. Because investment implies return. Expense implies loss. The language shifts how you feel about the money leaving your account. Here's the hardest part. Speaking abundance when people around you are speaking scarcity. When everyone in your circle is complaining about money, talking about how hard things are, confirming that success is impossible, you have to hold a different conversation. You have to be the one who speaks possibility, not to convince them, to protect yourself. Because if you join their language, you join their reality. You don't argue with them. You just don't participate. When they complain, you stay neutral. When they speak limitation, you don't agree. You might say, I hear you, but I'm focused on finding solutions, or simply stay quiet. You cannot afford to absorb their scarcity language. It's too expensive. It costs you your future. Abundance language is also about precision. You speak in terms of specific goals, not vague wishes. I will have $10,000 in savings by December versus I hope to save some money. One is abundance backed by clarity. The other is wishful thinking. Abundance without clarity is just fantasy, but abundance with clear targets is power. And remember, your language leads your actions. If you speak abundance consistently, your brain starts looking for ways to make it true. It starts seeing opportunities. It starts making different choices. It builds momentum. But you have to hold the language first, even when the bank account doesn't match. Because the bank account is the lagging indicator. Your language is the leading indicator. So speak abundance today. Not because you have money, because you're building it, not because things are easy. Because you're committed to growth, not because everyone around you agrees. Because you're leading yourself. That's the language that breaks poverty cycles. That's the language that creates wealth. And that's the language you must master, especially when it's hardest to speak. Chapter 9. Financial literacy is a language you must learn. You are financially illiterate, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a fact. Most people are. They speak English, they speak their native language, but they don't speak money. And because they don't speak money, they can't negotiate with it. They can't understand its rules. They can't leverage its systems. They're trying to play a game without knowing the language it's played in. That's why they lose. Financial literacy is not about knowing every investing strategy or understanding complex derivatives. It's about understanding the basic language of how money moves, grows, and works. It's about knowing terms like assets, liabilities, cash flow, equity, compound interest, tax efficiency, and opportunity cost. Not theoretically, practically, in a way that changes how you make decisions every single day. Most people hear these terms and their eyes glaze over. They think it's too complicated. They think it's for accountants or finance professionals. But that's exactly why they stay broke. Because they've outsourced financial understanding to experts instead of becoming fluent themselves. And when you don't understand the language, you can't make informed decisions. You just follow advice blindly and hope it works out. Here's what financial literacy sounds like in practice. That's not an expense. That's an investment in an appreciating asset. My cash flow is positive from that rental property. I'm reducing my tax liability through strategic deductions. I'm leveraging other people's money to amplify returns. These aren't complicated sentences, but they reflect a completely different understanding of money than, I got paid, I spent it, it's gone. The language of financial literacy includes understanding the difference between an asset and a liability. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. Your house might be worth a lot, but if it costs you money every month and you're not generating income from it, it's a liability, not an asset. Your car is a liability. Your education loans are liabilities. Your investments, your rental properties, your dividend-paying stocks, these are assets. Knowing the difference changes everything. It also includes understanding cash flow. How much money is coming in? How much is going out? Where's it going? What's the gap? This is not complicated math, but most people never track it. They just know they're always short. Wealthy people track cash flow obsessively. They know exactly where every dollar is. They optimize inflows and outflows. They create positive cash flow that compounds over time. That's not luck. That's literacy. You also need to understand compound interest, not as an abstract concept. As the most powerful wealth-building force available to you, $500 per month invested at 8% for 30 years becomes $745,000, but most people don't invest $500 per month because they don't understand what it becomes. They see the $500 as money they can't spend now. They don't see the $745,000 they're giving up later. That's illiteracy, and it costs them their financial freedom. Debt is another language most people don't speak. They think all debt is bad. But wealthy people understand that there's good debt and bad debt. Bad debt finances depreciating liabilities, consumer debt, credit cards, car loans for vehicles you don't need. Good debt finances income-producing assets, mortgages on rental properties, business loans that generate more return than the interest cost. The language of debt literacy is knowing the difference and using good debt strategically while avoiding bad debt completely. Tax literacy is where most people lose massive amounts of money. They don't understand deductions, credits, tax-advantaged accounts, or strategic timing. They just pay whatever the system says they owe. But the tax code is written in a language that rewards those who speak it. It's full of legal ways to reduce your tax burden. But if you don't speak that language, you can't access those benefits. So you pay more than you have to year after year, while wealthy people legally pay less because they understand the rules. Real estate language is another piece. Terms like cap rate, cash-on-cash return, equity, leverage, and 1031 exchange. If you don't know what these mean, you can't evaluate property deals. You can't negotiate effectively. You can't build wealth through real estate. But if you learn the language, suddenly you see opportunities everywhere. You understand why someone would buy a property that barely breaks even monthly, because they're playing a longer game with equity and appreciation. Investment literacy includes understanding risk, diversification, asset allocation, and time horizon. It means knowing the difference between speculation and investment. between gambling and calculated risk, between following trends and following strategy. Most people invest emotionally. They buy high because everyone's excited. They sell low because they panic. They chase returns without understanding risk. That's not investing. That's illiteracy destroying wealth. Business and entrepreneurship have their own language: revenue versus profit, gross margin versus net margin, fixed costs versus variable costs, customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value. If you want to build income outside of a job, you have to speak this language. You have to understand how businesses make money, where they fail, and how to structure them for success. Otherwise, you're just guessing. And guessing doesn't build sustainable income. Here's the truth. You don't need to become a financial expert, but you do need to become financially literate enough to make informed decisions, to understand what your financial advisor is saying, to evaluate opportunities, to recognize scams, to protect yourself from bad advice, to take advantage of systems that are available to everyone but understood by few. And the only way to become literate is to commit to learning. Not someday. Now. You read books on money. You take courses, you study wealthy people's strategies, you learn the terminology, you practice applying it to your own situation, you ask questions, you stay curious, you treat financial literacy like the essential life skill it is, not like optional information you'll get to eventually. Most people spend more time learning about their favorite TV show than they spend learning about money. Then they wonder why their finances are a disaster. You cannot build wealth through ignorance. You cannot master what you don't understand. And you cannot understand what you refuse to learn. Financial literacy is not optional. It's the price of admission to wealth. The language of money is learnable. It's not reserved for the highly educated or the mathematically gifted. It's accessible to anyone willing to put in the work. And the work is simple: consistent learning, consistent application, consistent refinement. You don't need to know everything. You need to know enough to make better decisions than you're making now. And then keep learning. Every term you learn gives you more power. Every concept you understand opens new possibilities. Every system you master makes you more money. This is not abstract education. This is practical, life-changing knowledge that directly impacts your bank account. And the cost of not learning it is poverty. Not dramatic, news-making poverty. Quiet, paycheck to paycheck, never quite making it poverty. That's the cost of financial illiteracy. So start learning the language today. Pick one concept, research it, understand it fully, then apply it to your situation. Then pick another. Build your financial vocabulary one term at a time. And watch how your financial reality changes as your literacy improves. Because money flows to those who speak its language. And once you're fluent, everything becomes easier. Not because money gets easier, because you finally understand how to work with it instead of against it. Conclusion: the language you speak today builds the wealth you have tomorrow. If you've made it this far, you understand something most people never will. Money isn't just about numbers. It's about communication. It's about the language you use, the words you choose, the way you think, and the standards you hold. And every single day, through every thought and every sentence, you're either speaking the language that builds wealth or the language that destroys it. You started this audiobook probably thinking you needed another strategy, another tip, another shortcut to financial success. But what you've learned is that the real work is deeper. It's in how you communicate with yourself about money, how you talk about it to others, how you think about it when no one's listening. That internal and external communication is creating your financial reality, one word at a time. You've learned that your money language has been keeping you broke, that phrases like, "I can't afford it," and "I'm not good with money" aren't just descriptions, they're programming. They're instructions to your brain to stay exactly where you are. And you've learned that changing those phrases, replacing scarcity with possibility, is the first and most critical step toward wealth. You've learned that money responds to clarity, not hope. That vague wishes create vague results, but specific, clear, measurable goals create focused action. You've learned that negotiating with yourself is a losing game, and that non-negotiable standards are what separate those who build wealth from those who constantly restart. You've learned that money only flows to those who respect it, that carelessness, waste, and disregard aren't neutral. They're actively repelling wealth, and that respect, attention, and stewardship create a completely different relationship with money, one where it wants to stay and grow. You've learned that your vocabulary is not neutral, that every word you use about money is either expanding your possibilities or contracting them, that speaking abundance even when the account is low is not delusion, it's strategy. It's keeping your mind open, your focus sharp, and your behavior aligned with growth instead of survival. You've learned that wealthy people think in terms of value, not hours, that trading time for money is a trap that can never lead to real wealth, and that the shift from hourly thinking to value-based thinking is what unlocks leverage, scalability, and freedom. You've learned that financial silence is a form of power, that the less you broadcast, the more you protect, that operating quietly, building privately, and letting results speak for you is far more effective than announcing every move and seeking validation at every turn. You've learned that financial literacy is not optional, that speaking the language of money, understanding terms, systems, and strategies, is what gives you power in a world designed to keep the financially illiterate broke, and that committing to ongoing learning is the only way to stay ahead. So here's where you are now. You have the knowledge, you understand the principles, you've seen the patterns. Now the only question is whether you'll apply it, because knowledge without action is just expensive entertainment. Understanding without execution is just intellectual tourism. And if you close this audiobook and go back to the same language, the same habits, the same communication patterns, nothing will change. But if you take this seriously, if you commit to monitoring your language, upgrading your vocabulary, building clarity, showing respect, learning the literacy, and speaking abundance even when it's hard, everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but certainly, progressively, compoundingly. Here's your next 90 days. This is not a suggestion. This is your roadmap if you're serious about this. Month 1. Language audit and replacement. For the next 30 days, your only job is awareness. Notice every phrase you use about money, write them down, then systematically replace toxic language with empowering language. Practice daily, out loud, until the new language becomes automatic. Month 2. Clarity and systems. Get brutally specific about your financial situation and your goals. Write down exact numbers. Create a plan. Build systems. Automate what can be automated. Eliminate negotiation loops. Set non-negotiable standards and start following them. Track everything. Month 3. Learning and application. Commit to financial literacy. Read one book on money. Take one course. Learn one new concept per week and apply it immediately to your situation. Surround yourself with people who speak the language of wealth. Start speaking it too. And beyond that, you keep going. Because this isn't a project. This is a permanent shift in how you relate to money. This is a new language that becomes your native tongue. This is a communication upgrade that lasts for life. The wealthy are not smarter than you. They're not luckier. They don't have secret information you can't access. What they have is a completely different way of communicating with money. And now, so do you. You understand how language shapes reality. You understand how words program behavior. You understand how communication creates wealth. So the question is simple. Will you use it? Will you speak the language starting today? Will you catch yourself when scarcity language creeps in and consciously choose abundance? Will you track your words like you track your dollars? Will you treat your financial communication as the most important conversation of your life? Because it is. Every word you speak about money is a vote for the financial future you're creating. Every thought you allow is shaping the reality you'll live in. And if you want a wealthy future, you have to start speaking it into existence today. Not hoping for it. Speaking it. Not wishing for it. Communicating it through every choice, every action, every word. Money is listening. It's always been listening. The question is, what have you been telling it? Up until now, you've probably been telling it you're not ready, that you're struggling, that you're overwhelmed, that you can't figure it out, and money heard you. It responded by staying away. But from this moment forward, you're going to tell it something different. You're going to speak wealth, clarity, discipline, and respect. You're going to communicate in the language that money understands and responds to. And money, like any good relationship partner, will respond to the new communication. Not immediately, but consistently. And consistently is all you need. You don't need a miracle. You need a new language. And you have it now. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need clear communication. And you know how to create it. You don't need more money to start. You need better language, and that costs nothing but discipline. So start speaking now. Start today. Start this moment. Every sentence is a choice. Every word is a direction. Every thought is a brick in the financial future you're building. Speak like someone who understands money. Speak like someone who respects it. Speak like someone who is building wealth, not hoping for it. Speak like someone who knows the language. Because now you do. And 5 years from now, when your financial life looks completely different, when you're living with margin instead of stress, when opportunities are appearing instead of passing by, when your net worth is growing instead of stagnating, you'll look back at this moment. You'll remember when you learned the language of money, when you committed to speaking it every day, when you stopped communicating scarcity and started communicating abundance. That moment is now. That decision is yours. Money is waiting to respond to the new conversation. The only question is, are you ready to speak it? Start now. Speak wealth, build wealth, become wealth, not through magic. Through the most powerful tool you have, your words. Use them wisely, use them intentionally, use them like your financial future depends on it, because it does.